We're towards the middle of the 12th chapter of Sefer Shel Beinanim Likutei Amarim Tanya. We are at the words Ve'af. Ve'af, those words can be found somewhere. Ve'af al pikein. Yep, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines from the bottom of page Yud Zayin, which would be page 33 in the English. So 11 lines from the bottom of page 33 if you have the standard Tanya edition. Middle of chapter 12. Thanks God, over the last few lessons of chapter 12, which we had 3 already, I think, we went through a lot of the commentary, we went through a lot of the explanation, a lot of the in-depth translating what Alter Rebbe is writing. And the subjects that we will read today is essentially a wrap-up of all that we read and all that we discussed previously. And therefore today will be more reading, translating, and understanding simply on the basic level because we've already been through all of the unpacking. So we'll spend a little bit less time unpacking and a little bit more time covering ground. Today we are at the words V'af al pikein in the middle of chapter 12. Says the Alter Rebbe, even though we've just described that the Beinani never sins and never even considers to sin, even though his Yetzer Hara is alive and strong and burning with passion and desire, Af al pikein still, Eino nikra tzaddik klal, the Beinani is not going to be called a tzaddik at all, mipnei sheyisrein hazeh, because this advantage that he has, asher lo'er nefesh ve'elikis al cheshach v'sichla shel haklippa hanitch memela, the advantage that we've described, using the term that was coined by Shlomo HaMelech, that I saw the advantage of wisdom over foolishness, that it behaves, it works out in the same way as light and its advantage over darkness, that all you have to do is turn on the wisdom and the foolishness is washed away. So the Beinani, the average human being who's living up to their best potential, has turned on the light of wisdom because in his davening, he focused his mind on Hashem's greatness and he focused his mind on the fact that the world was created by Hashem and for Hashem's purpose. And he focused his mind on all the kindness and the compassion that Hashem shows, and so on and on and on, all the things that arouse a sense of love and yearning in the heart of a Jew for Hashem. And with that, he's now armed to stand against the Yetzer Hara and to overwhelm the Yetzer Hara and even to shut him down during davening, because in the face of such clarity, the lies of the Yetzer Hara, the lies that come from the evils of the animal soul, they don't have any footing. Even so, even though the Beinani has this advantage during the time of davening, which is an opportune time for expressing this advantage, once the davening is over, that advantage, the control, the self-control, is only controlling the expressions that are allowed to go through the body. But the divine soul, the nefesh elikis, does not have control enough to prevent the evils of the animal soul, or even to prevent the animal soul from being an animal, meaning from expressing its animalistic base desires and interests. One might think that because the Beinani was so successful in contemplating the greatness of Hashem, and he worked up a feeling of love and desire and awe and reverence for Hashem during his davening, one might think that the nefesh habahamis, the animalistic tendencies of the animal soul, have been displaced. That's not so, says the Alter Rebbe. They still are there in their original home, in the heart of the person, safely rooted in that left ventricle of the heart where the blood is refreshed, like we described, and the passions of the human being are in their full strength. Because once the davening is over, the right side of the heart is not overflowing with love. It's not even full of love. The decisions that he has made, the realizations that the Beinoni has come to in preparation for davening, that make the person so concentrated on their love for Hashem, to the point that during davening, the nefesh habahamis, the animal soul, is silent. That doesn't last once the davening is over. During the time of davening, what the Beinoni is processing in his intellect is spreading to the heart, so that the right side of the heart, which is the humble side, is full of yearning and love for Hashem, and that is, it fills up the heart to the point where the evils of the animal soul have no room. They're not given room for expression. When the davening is over, all of that passion, all of that love, all of that yearning, it recedes slowly, which means the heart, if the heart were full of love for Hashem, like a water balloon is full of water, and then you open it up and you let it seep out, and slowly the water seeps out and the heart goes back to its regular interests, and all of that intensity recedes further and further until it just exists in the mind of the Beinoni, where it originated from during the time of davening. Kiyim, and therefore, the love is not revealed in the heart in a tangible way for the Beinoni to be excited and loving and enthusiastic about serving Hashem all day long. Instead, the love for Hashem is spread in a hidden way, in a unconscious way across the heart of the Beinoni. Rotzuf, interesting, is associated with the word ritzpah, which means floor. So that just helps to emphasize how subconscious this love, how far into the subconsciousness of a person, this love for Hashem will recede once the davening is over and he's busy with his worldly affairs. All the way to the sides, all the way to the periphery. V'yazai, and when that happens, and what kind of love is it? In addition to the fact that it's receded into the periphery, it is by nature a love that's hidden. It's by nature a love that's instinctive. And the difference between a conscious love and an instinctive love is that a conscious love you feel in your mind and in your heart. An instinctive love you don't feel unless in case of emergencies. And if you want to feel that love in a time that's not an emergency, you need to paint the picture in your mind of something that will draw that love out into the conscious feelings of your heart. During the time of davening, that's what the Beinoni did. When the davening is over and he's no longer painting himself that picture, so the love recedes. What happens then? Later in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe will describe to us exactly the mechanisms of this hidden love. But for now, we're describing the process of the Beinoni after davening. At that time, the foolishness of the evils of the animal soul can take their quote unquote rightful place in the left, arrogant half of the heart. Self-absorbed, self-interested, self-oriented side of the heart, that's the left side. To lust, all kinds of desires after all the things, all the affairs of this physical world. Bein beheter, whether that soul is lusting after things that are permitted, which is a natural Jewish inclination, or bein beisur chas v'shalom, or even to lust after things that are forbidden. God forbid, it's not even a Jewish inclination, like we've learned earlier. I'm referencing, you may have noticed, I'm referencing long discussions that we've had in the past weeks and months. So if you are reviewing the video, if you're watching this video and you haven't seen the previous videos, then this may not be clear. But if you remember, or if you took notes, and if you study the previous chapters, you've heard all these discussions and you'll understand the references. Ke'ilu loy hispalel klal. The love for Hashem that's developed during the time of davening can recede so far to the point where it will seem to the Beinoni that he has not davened at all. This is a very familiar, very common feeling. And another example of it is anytime you feel a certain sense of inspiration and you say, this time is going to be different because now I'm truly inspired, and a day passes, a week passes, a month passes, and it's as if you never were inspired to begin with. That's the nature of such an emotion. You sit by a Farbrengen and somebody gives it, somebody presents the idea of serving Hashem in such a way that it really talks to you and it really gets you going, and you make a decision and you're going to work hard and you're going to do the better than you've done before. I can tell you, in the time it takes to bench, clean up the Farbrengen, get in the car, drive home, prepare for bed and sleep, the inspiration is gone. Yeah, and by the time we're saying Shema for bedtime the night after the Farbrengen, the inspiration has already dissipated, as if I never went to a Farbrengen. It's not uncommon. This is a common experience in the life of a Beinoni, even a Beinoni that invests heavily in his davening. Well, what do we mean to invest heavily in our davening? That means that before you opened your mouth to say a word, you already contemplated the greatness of Hashem. That means that before you open your mouth to say a word, you already contemplated your gratitude to Hashem. That means before you open your mouth to say a word, you already cleared your mind of all worldly worries. And that means that once you start to say the words of davening, the intensity of your feelings of gratitude and love and yearning and closeness to Hashem become more and more stronger and stronger, to the point that when you get to Shema and you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, or whichever other phrase of davening really gets you, you're bursting. Happens once in a while, if you really put in the effort. Even after such a davening, very shortly after such a davening, a Beinoni, which means the average human being who is doing their very best, not trying to do their very best, the average human being who is actually doing the very best that an average human being can do, very shortly after even such an inspired davening, the enthusiasm, the inspiration, and the love that he's developed for Hashem in his conscious heart has dissipated to the degree that it feels as though he never invested at all. In the finance world, it's called, we had a bust that erased all the profits, as if there is no remnant of the investment whatsoever. Why do we say this? Why must we insist so strongly that it's as if you never davened at all? Because the heart is lusting things that are forbidden. A minute ago, you said to Hashem, I love you to the point where I devote my whole life to you. And 5 minutes later, you're saying, but you know what? I would really like a cheeseburger. Says the Alter Rebbe, now wait a minute. Does that sound like a Beinoni to you? Obviously, when it comes to the forbidden thing that the heart is lusting, the Beinoni is not considering to actually do it. As we described, like by eating an Yom Kippur, the heart wants, that's true, but the Beinoni is not considered, he's not actually considering that he's going to do it. But the fact that it exists in his heart bespeaks the opposite of inspiration, a lack of connectivity to Hashem. So why are we worried? Let's say the Beinoni is not thinking that he's actually going to eat a cheeseburger. The heart is saying, all American kids eat cheeseburgers. I'd like to eat a cheeseburger one day. It's a theoretical desire. The example that Rabbi Silverberg, who spoke to us a few months ago in preparation for these chapters, in his lesson on this chapter, he gives the following analogy. He says, you watch on the news that a human being successfully climbed Mount Rushmore. Not Mount Rushmore, what's the big one? Mount Everest. Nobody else. Who wants to climb Mount Rushmore? No. You read on the news that a human being successfully climbed Mount Everest. And you say, I'd love to do that. Would you love to do that? You would love to do that. Is there a thought in your brain that says that you're actually gonna do that? No, it's an entirely theoretical desire. How awesome would it be to reach the peak of Mount Everest? I would love it, but I ain't gonna do it. It's never gonna happen. And yet, my heart is pulling the strings. The image of me at the top of Mount Everest. Feels so good. Never gonna do it. Yeah. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? You know the answer? Practice, practice, practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Say, I would love to be in Carnegie Hall. I would love to perform it. Ain't never gonna happen. It's a theoretical desire. Ain't never gonna happen. That's the kind of desire that the Beinoni, the average human being who is doing the very best that the average human being can do, those are the kind of desires he has for things that are forbidden. So why are we worried about it? He's never going to do them. Here the Alter Rebbe says, thoughts of sin are in a way worse than the sin itself. Why are thoughts of sin worse than the sin themselves? Well, there's really one reason. Reason number one is that if, God forbid, a person sinned with their hands, the mark that's left on the soul of the person is somewhat muted and easily washed off, because action is very far from the soul. If somebody spoke sinful words, that's worse, because he sinned, and on top of the sin, the mark that he left on his soul is deeper, more profound, and harder to wash off, because speech is closer to the soul than action is. And if a person thought sinful thoughts, so you can ask a fair question. Did he actually sin? He didn't actually sin. He just imagined himself sinning. And it didn't lead to anything forbidden. It was just in his thoughts. Well, you can say he sinned and he wasted time from Torah study. Okay, so let's say you found a situation where Torah study was forbidden and he was thinking a sinful thought. But he didn't sin and it didn't lead to anything sinful. Still, the mark that is left on the soul, that is directly housed inside your thoughts, in the mind, the mark that's left on the soul of the person is even more profound, because they are neighbors. Your soul and your thoughts are next door neighbors. And whatever happens in your thoughts has a greater and deeper impact on your soul than what happens in your speech and in your action. And therefore, what happens when the soul, what happens when that garment called nefesh, that connects the body and soul together, becomes blemished dirtied and damaged by thoughts of sin, your spiritual immune system becomes compromised, and the viruses of impurity are able to jump into your head faster, easier, and you have less control. The Alter Rebbe calls it, you could become spiritually confused. You could become spiritually disrupted and distracted from your service of Hashem because of the stains, because of the damage that would be caused by thoughts of sin, even though there was no actual sin, but because of this, the dirt, the filth, the damage, and the grime that's left on your soul. A person becomes more susceptible to falling, backsliding, and Rahman al-Islam even being led into an actual sin. Like the sages say, and the sages say there are 3 sins that a person can never be saved from, and those are thoughts of sin, a lack of proper attention during prayer, etc. These sins are sins of the mind. There is not a commandment. There is not a commandment that dictates how long and how deep a person has to meditate on prayer. A person has to meditate on prayer until their heart is on fire with love for Hashem. There is not a specific decree that says thou shalt not imagine sin. It says you have to stay away from all evil things, and that includes thoughts of sin. These 2 are sins of the mind, and a person does not really have that much control over his mind, particularly the Beinani. Now, how is it that a Beinani should not have control over his mind and we should still call him a Beinani? This average human being who has reached the pinnacle of averageness, the Beinani, still has thoughts, urges for forbidden things, and we're calling him a Beinani. Because, like the Alter Rebbe will say in a minute, it's not him. Who is the Beinani? There's a very dynamic inner life going on inside of every human being. You have the divine soul, you have the animal soul, and you have the human. Who is the human? The intellect of the animal soul. The intellect of the animal soul is not choosing these forbidden thoughts. The intellect of the animal soul is receiving them from the evils of the animal soul, same as it is receiving positive thoughts from the goodness of the divine soul. And the question is, what will determine whether he's a Beinani, meaning the average human being who has achieved the best that an average human being can achieve, versus being a Rasha, a sinful person? Who will determine? Well, it depends what he does with that thought when it arrives. Now, how does a human being who is suffering these constant attacks from the evils of the animal soul, how does he survive throughout the day without falling prey to them? Where does he take the strength to overcome those impulses time and time again? The answer is, you have to realize that after a person has invested so much effort in his davening, contemplating the greatness of Hashem and how much he appreciates Hashem and how much gratitude he feels to Hashem and how Hashem is involved in everything and how everything in the world is for Hashem's purpose and for nothing else, and you work at that until it inspires a feeling of love and awe in your heart, and then it recedes from your heart when you finish davening. True, it receded from your heart. What's left is the mental process. Your frame of mind doesn't have to change. certainly not all at once, like the heart, and even not at all. Your frame of mind does not have to change, because your frame of mind is constantly a choice. The inspiration will change, but your frame of mind is a constant choice. The Beinoni can always choose to remain in the God-oriented frame of mind. And that is helped by the fact that during davening, that frame of mind was wrapped in tremendous inspiration because of all the thinking and contemplating, praying, and maybe even singing that he was doing. So to survive the whole day without any flaw in thought, speech, or action, even though the evils of the animal soul constantly bombard you with interference, with static, with distractions, the impact of all your efforts have made on your mindset, on your frame of mind, those will stay with you after you have davened. What's more is that, as we've described, you have an innate love for Hashem, and you have an innate awe and respect for Hashem in a concealed way, but you have it always there in your heart. And those two tools can be activated to overcome the lusting of the evils of the animal soul. To what degree? To prevent the animal soul from speaking its piece? No. But at least to prevent it from gaining control over any sector of the small city, meaning the body. Preventing it from bringing into expression any of its desires in any quarter of the human body. And the unique part about the Beinoni, the most unique part about this Beinoni, this average human being who has reached the very, very height, the greatest level that an average human being can reach, is that he's capable of preventing his mind from entertaining the evil thoughts that come from the evils of the animal soul. That means that the discipline, the devotion, the frame of mind that is left over after all your efforts in davening will help to prevent the animal soul from gaining control, the evils of the animal soul, from gaining control over the thought processes and interests that are being expressed consciously in the mind of this Beinoni. Namely, what's the process? What's the procedure? In order for a person to be deserving of blame or credit for entertaining any thought, he needs to transition from the constant channel surfing that's going on in his head, and that's normal in a human being. Normal in the average human being is the constant channel surfing that goes on in your head. And you think about this, and then I think about that, and I think about the other thing, and I think about a third thing, and a fourth thing, and a fifth thing. And when I have to get to work, when I have something important to do, I make a decision, and the channel surfing stops, and I make a choice. I'm going to focus my thoughts on a given subject. That choice transforms the thought from noise into contemplation, focused, from chaos into focus. The Beinoni, because of the remaining strength of his frame of mind left over from davening, has the capacity to never choose to focus, or always to choose not to focus on the thoughts that come to the mind amidst all that noise from the evils of the animal soul. Never to contemplate them, never to entertain those thoughts. Elo, rather, what does he do? Miyad ba'aliyasi l'sham, as soon as the thought rises there, dayichehu b'shtei yadayim, he pushes it away with both hands. Umasiach dato miyad, and he removes his thoughts immediately. Shanizkar shuhu hirhura, as soon as he recognizes that it is a thought that comes from evil. He does not accept willingly, even to willingly contemplate the ideas that are offered by the evils of the animal soul. The kol shekein lahalosi al hadas la'aseh chas v'shalom v'yafilu ledaber boi, and certainly he does not willingly accept the notion of contemplating the actual fulfillment of that desire, to act on that bad wish, and even not even to speak about it. Why is that important? Why is that critical in order for the person to be qualified as a bona fide Beinani? Beinani meaning non-sinner, non-sinner being the very best that an average human being can achieve. And we've described this so many different ways in all the previous lessons. I think it's clear. Why is the ability to push away, to deflect negative thoughts that come into the mind from the evils of the animal soul, why is that so critical to the determination of whether or not a person is a Beinani? Because if a person considers an evil thought, in that moment he is called a sinner. In that moment he has lost his status as a non-sinner. And we already described in the introduction to this persona called Beinani that a Beinani was never and is never called Rasha, even for a moment in his whole life. A non-sinner has to be a non-sinner. A non-sinner cannot be one who sometimes considers the fulfillment of a sin. A non-sinner cannot be one who sometimes fantasizes about the fulfillment of a sin. That's not called a non-sinner. That's not called a person who is free of sin. Very important language, I think, if the word choice is correct. Non-sinner does not mean, free of sin does not mean free of evil. There is an evil that's natural to the animal soul because of its self-orientation. Self-orientation leads to greed. Self-orientation leads to arrogance, self-aggrandizement, maybe even anger, jealousy, laziness, depression, and so on and so forth. All the evil, all the unholy emotions that were described in the end of chapter 1. Those are all the product of self-orientation. It's a natural evil that exists in a self-oriented soul. So the Beinani, whom we are calling free of sin, is not free of evil, but he is free of sin. And that sin, the freedom from sin exists all the way into the thought processes of this person. He never fantasizes about a sin. He never considers the mechanics of a sin, and certainly not the opportunities to sin. That would make him no longer free of sin. So obviously, this Beinani, if he's going to be free of sin, he cannot only be free of sin between himself and God, those spiritual sections of life, but even also he has to be free of sin and even free of thoughts of sin when it comes to interpersonal matters. For example, as soon as some jealousy, some anger, some grudge, some hatred creeps up into his mind from his heart, he never willingly contemplates such negative feelings towards a fellow human being. The opposite is true in the case of a person who is free of sin. In the case of a person who is free of sin, this very best average human being, his mind is capable of ruling and controlling the spirit in his heart, and he's able to lead himself to do the exact opposite of what his first instinct was, He has the capacity where instead of acting in anger, instead of acting out his jealousy, instead of acting out his grudge, he's able to treat the person with tremendous kindness to counteract those negative feelings. A human being has the capacity to do this at all times. This is similar to what we said earlier about the section of life where a person is relating to Hashem. We said with regards to the relationship that the Beinoni has with Hashem, that a Beinoni is perfectly capable of switching his mind from worldly interests that are not holy, not only to remove the unholiness and do it for a good purpose, but even to transform his thoughts and turn them completely onto something holy, to turn them onto the divine channel. And think about Hashem and his purpose. Here also, in a similar, just like you're capable of transforming your mind from evil to holy in your man-God relationship, you're capable of doing that as well in your interpersonal relationship. Here you are feeling angry at a person and you're feeling like you have to lash out, you want to lash out. A person is always capable of transforming that thought process and instead searching for ways to be kind and loving. And the Alter Rebbe uses a term, chiba yesera, a demonstration of the tremendous preciousness that this person whom you were previously angry at, a human being is capable of arousing tremendous feelings of love, even for one who angered, insulted, upset, and so on. Lisbel mimenu ad kotze ha'achare. A person, what does it mean to treat a person with kindness and to turn on the tremendous love that you have for every Jew and for every human being, is to lisbel, I'll just translate it directly. Lisbel mimenu ad kotze ha'achare, to suffer from them to the farthest degree. And to never get angry, God forbid. And certainly, God forbid, never to pay them back in kind. The opposite is you're capable of doing the exact opposite. To give loving kindness to those who deserve, to the guilty parties. As it's described in Zohar, Lilmoid mi Yosef HaTzadik, Yosef im Echav, to learn a lesson from how Yosef HaTzadik treated his brothers. Famous story that I will share with you now, and I don't remember all the language, but I don't remember the names or the language, and you'll forgive me for that oversight. We know that in our community there's a wonderful Rav and Shliach, who the family is not originally from Lubavitch, and the story of how his father and his parents were attracted to Lubavitch, it contains a very impressive story about this theme that we're learning here. This theme that we're learning here is about demonstrating tremendous love for one who has done you harm, for one who has insulted you and hurt you. It was once at a Farbrengen that the father of our friend here in the community was listening as an older chassid from the old country, from the Soviet Union, was describing how the officers of the Soviet Union were tormenting them and torturing them, interrogating them, arresting them, harassing them, trying to get them to turn in their fellow Hasidim who are also involved in the previous Rebbe's work of maintaining a structure of Jewish life with Torah schools for the young boys and a moihel within reach of every Jewish community, a sheichet to prepare kosher food for all the Jews in the Soviet Union, and mikvahs for the Jewish women to use, all of this clandestine, all of this hidden, and all of this eventually costing the lives of some 400 Lubavitcher Hasidim, maybe more. Because the Soviet government would arrest them, pretend to try them, and then send them to Siberia where they would freeze or starve to death, or just shoot them. An example is the father of Mrs. Kazin, Allah Shalom. He was arrested and shot because he was a moyel. He was sneaking around the cities, providing bris milah for Jewish boys that were born. Another example is the grandfather of Rabbi Morozov, Reb Chanya Morozov. Also, he was arrested. He was involved in the coordination of this effort. He was one of the generals of the army, and he was arrested, and he as well was shot. Rabbi Kazin himself, Allah Shalom, Rabbi Kazin himself, whom we knew, was arrested and tried and held in prison for a while for being involved in the education in the underground schools of Torah for the Jewish boys. And the Hasidim would be arrested, and they would be tortured and tormented and harassed and harangued by the Soviets. Many of them Jews. Well, this Chassid is bringing and telling his story, and he's describing the pain and suffering that was caused to him by the officers of the Soviet police. And he's talking about this one interrogator in particular. And about this one interrogator in particular, he kept mumbling something under his breath. And when this wonderful Jew, who was not a Lubavitcher Chassid at that time, when he realized what the older Chassid was saying, he was transformed. Because the older Chassid kept mumbling under his breath, "V'Hashem hatoiv yechaper ba'adoi, doch fartayid." Hashem, in his goodness, should atone for him, because after all, he's also a Jew. In the middle of describing the pain and suffering that was inflicted on him by this guy, this older Chassid is praying for him that Hashem should forgive him his sins, because at the end of the day, he's also a Jewish boy. Misguided, misled, lost in a world of unholiness and confusion, but L'chfartayid. That is the impact of a mind focused on Hashem's purpose can have on your interpersonal relationships. That means if this chassid would see that young man today, he would embrace him. He would, if the man was willing, he would teach him Torah. He would bring him back. He would have no qualms accepting this young man as a Baal Tshuva, accepting this young man back into the fold of the Jewish community, even after all the hard, terrible things that he has done. A similar story is a friend in our community was learning Torah with a fellow Jew in one of the shuls, and the man from out of town peeked over his shoulder and he said, "No, what kind of Jew are you? You look like a Ben Torah. You look like a proper Orthodox Jew." And our friend said, "You know what? I am in fact a Lubavitcher." He said so very proudly. And the visitor says all kinds of nasty things about Lubavitch. And so in the moment, our friend defended strongly. And then the two of them went their separate ways. And our friend, the Lubavitcher Chassid, was feeling very uncomfortable with his response. That's not the way a Chassid ought to respond. A Chassid is meant to love a fellow Jew. A Chassid is meant to embrace a fellow Jew, even those that misbehave. And so this year, that guest from out of town returned, and the chassid saw him and took a moment to regroup and discussed with a mentor how he should approach this relationship with this human being. And obviously, as a chassid, he was told and he decided that he's going to ignore the whole fight that they had the previous year, and he's going to treat this fellow Jew with tremendous love and kindness and so on. The ultimate outcome of the story is unknown because it happened just recently. But the bottom line is that this is within the capacity of every human being. Every human being. Even if a person has done something absolutely awful to you, you have the choice. If you want to reach the ultimate, if you want to fulfill the ultimate potential of even the average human being, if we would like to reach, if we would like to attain the highest level that an average human being can achieve, we will be very careful and we'll be very focused on not allowing feelings of anger and grudges and so on and so forth to dictate our behavior, or even to occupy significant space in our minds. That is the power of moyich shalat ala leiv, the natural gift that Hashem has given us, that the mind rules over the heart. With this power that is natural and does not take any earning, you don't have to earn this gift, we're born with it. If we'll put it into practice and rehearse, right? How do you make it to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. If we will practice, practice, practice the art of keeping the mind in control and choosing our emotions and choosing our mind frame, our mindset and our frame of mind, we too can achieve the very best that any average human being can achieve. And that is the Beinoni. Bing.